Our newest arrival on our presidential coverage 2023 is Professor Anthony Ijiwere from Maduna University, and is here to give us insights on his expectations on the incoming administration of the President-elect Ahmed Bola Tinubu, as well as Vice President-elect Kashim Shettima. Professor Ijiwere was here during the election. Well, let's just engage him on one point. Outgoing President Muhammadu Buhari has told Nigerians that his greatest and perhaps the biggest legacy is bequeathing to Nigerians and Nigeria is an electoral system that has provided an elixir for Nigerians to actually determine who they want, an electoral system where the votes count, an electoral system where the destiny of Nigerians is actually in the hands. Well, people will have different feelings and disposition towards that statement. But Prof, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's good to see you again. Okay, quickly talk to us. Interestingly, you are a professor of business administration and management. The economy has been a major talking point in the last 8 years. A new man is coming on board today who has a very rich and robust history as it relates to deployment of men, materials, and resources in galvanizing a society as it were. What are expectations along those lines?
Well, I don't expect much, though the president-elect, until he's inaugurated, finally, before we can say President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Yes, he was a guru in the area of finance, and he demonstrated this while he was in Mobi Oil, while he was in the US, and he also demonstrated it while he was governor of Lagos State, where Obasanjo was in charge, or was the president at that period, and some local government, he created some local governments. And Obasanjo was not comfortable with it because he believed that it's not just a question of creating local government, but where's the finance? And since he did pass through the normal due process, the then president Obasanjo was not too comfortable with it, and therefore he decided to starve the new local government quotas at that time of funds. Since the president-elect Tinubu was good financial, he demonstrated good financial skill by mobilizing funds from local resources, and he was able to fund those local governments. I think to that extent, he's a financial expert. He knows how to manage finance. But the issue at stake now, as years ago and the present, are they still the same? Is the situation still the same? Does it still have the ability to do that? And that is the big question, because there's a lot of, managing state resources, local government resources, is not the same as federal, because there are a lot of variables when you are talking about federal managing resources at federal level, because you look at the source of revenue coming from federal government. They're enormous, and besides, there are a lot of interest groups when it comes to the federal level, because you'll be dealing with export import trade, which as a state governor at that time is not the same. Okay. You'll be dealing with custom duties, and because that is the bulk of revenue federal government gets, besides second source of revenue compared to oil. And we know there are a lot of financial mismanagement at that level, at the custom level, where a lot of revenue are expected to come in. And then when you also consider the inflation rate at the national level is not the same. For example, according to the Bureau of Statistics, the graduate unemployment rate is 58.6%. And the generally high unemployment, the general high employment rate is about 62.5%, which is very, very high. And and I think critics have been saying ever since he was appointed that the previous government, which is the same government anyway, it left a lot of liabilities on ground. Just because Buhari's government was very busy with borrowing from Chinese government and institutions. So how is it going to cope? Because we are talking about when the budget deficit is far higher than the revenue, the local revenue that is coming in. How do you manage the situation?
Okay, big question that the president-elect and his vice will answer. But we'll take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with you on presidential inauguration on ITV Network.
The new Milo 3-in-1 Milky and Creamy is truly milky and contains calcium. No need to add milk for that rich, creamy cup, which helps to nourish and energize your kids. Milo!
Thanks again for rejoining us on presidential inauguration on ITV Nigeria Network this beautiful Monday, the 29th day of May 2023. We'll get back to the studio now to interface with our panelists on the last lap of our conversation. Barrister Greg Iyayi. Yes. Expectations are high, but when you sample the views of Nigerians, it's like a wait-and-see game. Well, let's just sit down and watch and see how it pans out ultimately. Does that resonate with you?
It does, because the way the election was conducted is actually what is making Nigerians just have the attitude. I can tell you that many Nigerians are still waiting, or they are going to wait till after the Supreme Court ruling before they can take a stand. And that is fair enough. But while that is coming, Tinubu needs to convince Nigerians that he is really very qualified, because I don't like people speaking for him. He's of age. He has held many positions. Let him speak for himself, and whatever he gives to us, then let us judge him.
But it's a tradition globally that you have people appointed by the president as spokespersons, as media advisors, as special advisors, and all of that. So even if you have people speaking for the president, it's not out of place.
People spoke for Buhari and said he is the best president that Nigeria has had. But you and I know whether that is true or is not true.
All right, let's quickly come to Comrade Obidi. In his farewell speech, the outgoing president said, you either eat what we produce in this country or you go and die. And some economic experts are saying some of the setback he had while he was in office was the closure of our borders. If these borders were open, we would have had things coming to complement or help what we are producing in the country. Do you think those economic experts are out of place?
Well, you see, it is only in Nigeria. It is wisdom that before you create fish, you should have ponds. It is only Nigerians that bring in fishes without having ponds. They pour their fishes on ordinary floor before they start looking for ponds. Okay, and before you know, a lot of fishes are dead. Now, your policy was to close the borders. What was on ground before the closure of border? As I speak to you, a lot of farmers, because of insecurity, could not go to their farms. And most of these products that sustain Nigerians, the food that sustain the entire country, comes from majority of these places where we have insecurity. We have it so bad that some farmers have to pay security levies to bandits and terrorists before they can access their farm and access their farm produce. So a strategic government or a thinking government would settle and resolve issue of insecurity and haven't been able to produce locally, you will now be diving into export of your local products. At that point, you can cut off importation.
Okay.
Because when you cut off importation without having enough for internal satisfaction or self-sufficiency, what happens there? The goods of those commodities, the price of the goods of those commodities will skyrocket.
Yeah.
And that is what we saw. And inflation rate will increase because you have a lot of money chasing very limited and few goods in the system. And that is why we saw today that bag of rice is over 40,000 and what have you. So what is expected
from this government
now is that policies engagement should be properly analyzed and stakeholders should be engaged before such policies are put in place. Institutions should be strengthened to deploy these policies and not influenced by political considerations.
Okay, man, thank you very much, Professor Tony Ijeore. Give us your last take on the policy somersault, which is something that has been part of our it's been part of governance over the years. I mean, this government starts something, another government comes in. Whether it's the same party or not the same party, there's a policy somersault. And I know that Nigerians are really in a hurry they're going to be in a hurry with the present administration, to see how he's able to affect things, change things, and all of that. Let's quickly get your take on that.
Yes, Duke is most unfortunate. What the discovered Buhari administration is that he was not putting the right people in the right place. For example, the Minister of Finance ought to be an expert, a well-known expert in financial activity, financial deals. But the present minister, until they hand over today, is not in that area. We have gurus in finance, professors, various universities. They were not used. What they were doing was sort of political patronage, and there was no serious contract monitoring. Team that monitor contract. So individuals were just helping themselves, taking advantage of the president leisure approach to governance, and people were filling their bank account with all sorts of money. Contracts were not well monitored, even where contracts were executed, they were not. So you see, before a country economy start having issues, there must be the right policy put in place. What is our gross domestic product? What is our natural? How much product are we producing? What are we producing? What revenue are we deriving from export as against import? Because when your import is more than export, we have what you call budget deficit. So the country was sick in budget deficit, and that is why at the end of the day, about 50% of government expenses were borrowed to finance government. You don't borrow to finance people who are in the ministries and parastatals. Meanwhile, revenue is not coming in, to take care of that. And what do you expect? What do you expect is budget deficit. There was no import good policy. There was no export. So the economy was in shambles, total confusion. Okay. So I'm just sorry for the new government that's coming into there because it's a lot of work that's going to be done.
All right, that's the reason that's the reason they were elected, and I'm always concerned when a new government comes in and blames the previous government. We won't accept that because you told us in your campaigns you are going to fix the problem. So we expect that you'd have done some feasibility studies, assessment of the critical needs of Nigeria, a very comprehensive, robust needs assessment before you come into government. So you can hit the ground running. That's the least we expect from the incoming administration. Anyway, Once a big thanks to Professor Ijewere. We should have had you much earlier. Comrade Ogbidi, thank you for coming.
Thank you very
Barrister
much.
Greg Iyayi, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We'll take a short break.